Hey guys, you want to see a Mega Man reference?
Look no further.
You gotta be shitting me. Awesome, now that I've got your attention, we've had to make some pretty drastic budget cuts as of late, and as a result I can't really be bothered making some long, dumbass 1-minute intro that no one cares about, so let's just hop right on this thing, that's what she said. It makes sense for the easiest boss to be in the very first level of the game, but Prologue URIZEN is as much a boss as Ninja Theory's DMC is canon. This boss can take anywhere from 15 seconds to a good 15 minutes depending on how aware you are that his HP isn't going down that much, and that you're actually supposed to let him kill you to make progress into the real first mission of the game, which leads me to assert that Prologue URIZEN is the wild card boss of DMC 5. Schrodinger's boss, if you will. Depending on how far you're willing to push it, URIZEN's very first encounter can be anywhere from easier than your mother all the way to trying to shave your face with a lint roller. And granted, if you're hunting for achievements and stuff, you actually can kill him during the prologue, and the game will give you one of the most anticlimactic secret endings since Far Cry 4. But when starting the game with no abilities, upgrades, or any positive qualities whatsoever, you aren't expected to believe this is even slightly possible. So if you want to take the coward's way out, you can trigger the boss fight, make a trip to Arby's, eat some fucking lunch, and the mission menu will literally be waiting for you when you get back. And speaking of having no positive qualities, Rusty's easiest boss was Gilgamesh. This H.G. Wells War of the Worlds looking motherfucker is such a lumbering mess that I'm pretty sure he doesn't even realize he's being attacked until a good couple minutes into the fight. This boss is living, walking evidence that being taller and lankier than the rest of your buddies doesn't automatically make you a hard ass. Every single attack this guy throws at you either misses half the time, or the wind-up animations take longer than some of the bosses themselves. The true futility of this boss really shines, however, when you're attacking its head. This poor creature will do everything he can possibly think of to try and shake you off. He can shoot at you all he wants, but you can just hide on the other side of that pulsating tumor of his and practically guarantee your safety. And when he tries to reinforce his body with spikes, just jump and lay down some gunfire to keep airborne until they disappear, and then land right back on top of this dipshit's head and continue your offensive. He does have this one ground slam maneuver that does some pretty significant damage, but he gives you such a large window of time to move your ass out of the way that if you somehow manage to get caught by this thing, you deserve every single hit point of damage you take from it. In fact, this is actually his most damning attack, because from there you can just zip right back up to his head while he's so generously offering it to you and pound the crap out of him some more. Next in line for a good roasting is Proto ANGELO, which isn't even technically a boss. Any enemy whose name sounds like a jello probably won't do anything that impressive. He's such a disappointment, in fact, that he can't even look somewhat threatening without his boy band posse to back his ass up. And every time I've traded swords with this guy, I feel like I actually receive more trouble from the smaller dudes just because I'm not really that focused on them. I'm sure that at some point in his wildest, most unattainable dreams, he strives to be Nilo Angelo from the original DMC because that's exactly who he fucking looks like. But fortunately for you, this knight in shining armor has one glaring weakness, which is the accursed 3-second wind-up animation of all of his attacks. Get him down to his last leg of health and he glows red and enters a sort of berserk phase, and now he just fights with the speed of a normal dude. He is a bit of a heavy hitter though, and even though I didn't have that much trouble with it in this particular piece of footage, it can be kinda easy for the smaller dudes to distract you, giving time for the big bad to sneak up on you and throttle his Final Fantasy looking buster sword into your demon ass. The Goliath is the technical third boss you square off against, and fittingly the third biggest, most regretful failure of a demon warrior. The Goliath is what I call that boss. Every Devil May Cry game has one, and it's usually at the very beginning of the game. He's that one guy in the room that does nothing but sit back and suck his own dick talking shit all day. He always starts the fight by giving you his fancy, long-ass, make-believe Yu-Gi-Oh card sounding anime title that he gave himself, like the all-consuming omnipotent usurper of the divine throne or some bullshit anime jargon no one cares about. And then you actually get into the fight and realize his entire moveset is just 7 different variants of him belligerently punching the ground over and over again. But they throw in an arena change or two at you as a courtesy just to make sure you aren't getting bored. I can definitely tell you this is one of the most cinematic boss fights in the game during New Game Plus when Nero gets his big boy powers back, spoiler alert, and you can just single-handedly fling his fat ass into a clock tower. Other than that, there really are no surprises here. Goliath is a boss that absolutely no one expects to be hard, and thus absolutely no one is disappointed by. So, next. The QLIPHOTH Roots battle has a pretty weird tempo to it. It makes me feel like they were trying to recreate the Yoket Golem boss battle from DMC 2, which was just as equally big of a fucking joke. I actually feel like this boss could have been decently challenging, and could have actually appeared a good few missions later on in the game. I feel like this guy actually could have put up a good fight if it weren't for the dismally low health pool that it has. It's got a pretty decent first phase with a variety of tentacles and stuff you have to pay attention to while you're fighting it. The disappointment comes soon after that when you realize the first phase was actually its one and only. It is a beginner boss, so I'll argue the giant pulsing hit me here beacon planted in the middle of its body is kinda necessary. But as straightforward of a boss as it is, I did actually get hit a couple times when I was just being lazy and not paying attention to attack cues and stuff. And don't get me wrong here, this bloated demonic tomato is still an absolute pussy. But for the first official boss of the game, not too shabby. It's a nice reminder that Devil May Cry is indeed a franchise known for its insane difficulty levels. And if they wanted to make this boss challenging, well, they damn well could've. Next up is URIZEN himself. Only not Prologue URIZEN, but instead a combination of all the other 17,000 times you fought him in the game. These missions really should come with a warning label or something telling you not to strain too hard. Because if you were like me and damn near obsessed with perfect runs to the point where you won't even revive yourself even if you have the tools for it, figuring out that you have to die to actually progress might take a while. But there are a few things that suggest how long you have to fight him for. In Mission 8, for example, Nero actually makes a remark about the shield and how he can take it down, indicating that is your next objective. But then once that happens, he finally gets off his ass and the fight goes into a never-before-seen surprise butt sex second phase, and then you have to die. Honestly, the most difficult part of these fights is trying to figure out what in the unholy hell the game wants you to do, and where it wants you to stop fighting and just give up. The Mission 10 encounter being the easiest of them all, because as Dante, all you're really required to do is just beat the hell out of his rock candy totem for 30 seconds, and then in comes Nero to tie the loose end of the plot in Mission 8, and no joke, I shit you not, no April Fools, 100% serious, the mission just fucking ends. You're fighting and then it's over. It's over. You won. Go home. What are you doing here? I've actually went to Reddit forums and other YouTube videos to try and see if this fight was this easy for others, and it seems I'm the odd man out here. Vergil's second phase was pretty much exactly the same as his first, which is exponentially more difficult. I think it depends more on the array of attacks you have as Nero versus with Dante. Nero's devil power has awakened in him like a hibernating bear, and much like an animal who has just been rudely snapped out of its 3-month nap, he's probably fighting back the instinct to absolutely annihilate the very first moving thing he sees, and that just happens to be his own father. Vergil still has the exact same moveset from the first fight, and that does include a devil trigger of his own, so don't expect to lazily waltz into this final fight thinking your demon strength will take care of everything for you, because he can and will stomp your ass if you give him enough chances. Thing is, Vergil's entire second fight is meant to illustrate not Vergil's final power, but your own, so even if the fight is somewhat difficult, the game gives you more than enough buffs to ensure you can not only survive Vergil, but thoroughly, indisputably push his shit in like the demon warrior badass you've evolved into. Nero's Devil Breaker makes it noticeably easier to stagger him into a nice combo chain, and the hyper-regenerating Devil Trigger does you more than a couple favors just on its own. And as an added bonus, if you can end the fight with a grapple during DT mode, it'll give you one of the most satisfyingly decisive victories you've ever been a part of. Next up is Needhog. This boss reminds me a lot of the Leviathan Heart in DMC3, and to be honest, this guy is more annoying than he is actually challenging. Focusing on Needhog himself is the simplest and most straightforward way to do the most amount of damage to him, but the thing is this. He's got these 3 ridiculously giant Chamber of Secrets basilisk-looking shitheads that stay just far enough in the background for you to forget they exist, while you're busy sinking damage into the main boss. And I swear to God, it's like their AI is designed to catch you in the middle of this huge damage dealing combo, because every time he was in my attack range and I powered up one of my little pets over here, a giant gaping mouth would suddenly launch outwards from the background and stalemate them. But I can't really say that he's that challenging. When compared to other bosses, his health pool is nothing impressive, and that's especially true when you've got a demon servant the size of a literal tank just chilling in your back pocket. And I'm gonna be honest, I think the reason none of these bosses gave me that much trouble is because V is just that much of a badass. Any fight you could ever think of is pretty much trivialized when you can just summon 8,000 pounds of unholy demonic fat ass from the sky and just watch him do all the work for you. Malphas is one of the first end-game bosses, and it sure is a damn shame she fights like she's recuperating from a hangover. Granted, the speed of her attacks doesn't seem like something a giant ostrich demon should be capable of, but the attack cues are still there. And if you're paying attention, I can't imagine you having much trouble dodging her standard attacks. She has this teleporting Scarlet Witch-looking attack where she'll open dimensional rifts and try to claw you through one of those, but this attack just ends up making me chuckle because this really looks like it should do more than it does. Fighting her up until the last phase where you find out she had the tiger's claw Shengong Wu hidden up her ass the whole time, it's pretty intimidating. Problem is, she sucks balls at aiming rifts, and most of the attacks are so inaccurate that all you have to do is run around the arena and just wait for her to stop. She does have what I call a Dark Souls attack, where she realizes she is quite decisively losing the fight and will consequently cook up this huge, balls out, last ditch effort, raw, concentrated fuck you attack that you've never seen before in your life. And as damaging as this attack is, if you're able to get her health back down to where it was before she started regenerating, which is why I really like Punchline and Overture for this fight, it'll be more than enough to knock her out of it, leaving you free to resume your regularly scheduled animal abuse. Artemis probably wasn't that big of a deal for a lot of veterans, but this pterodactyl-looking asshole gave me PTSD from my DMC4 days while fighting Sanctus, where as soon as I would snatch my way up to where he would either bitch slap me right back down to the ground with some random staggering attack that kept me from getting any hits in, or just disappear and fly off somewhere else. And Artemis does a lot of that. Her attacks do minimal damage with the exception of her rush attack where she shows you her impression of a kamikaze plane, but they're just enough to divert you from sinking in damage when the opportunity is available. This is when you realize there's officially no shame in just buying out all the gun upgrades and poking her with your hand cannon from a safe distance. Depending on how fast or slow your playstyle is, this boss can be a bigger bitch than she has a right to be. But she is still a beginner boss, which means when you're playing like ass, the game has no shame in letting you know in quite possibly the most disparaging way I've ever seen. Here's the thing, Artemis has another one of those magic fuck you attacks I was talking about earlier, but the wind-up time on this thing is a Dragon Ball Z level of ridiculous. My controller could die and I could physically get up from my couch, walk to my roommate's controller on the shelf, sync it with my PS4, and still have enough time to stop this fucking thing. But if the boss slowly levitating up into the air with one of the most blatant audio crescendos I've ever heard isn't enough for you, then how about when Nero actually says to himself that someone should probably do something about the glowing demon in the room?
This doesn't look good. I need to stop her.
As if the game is literally going out of its way to ask you, dude, what in the capital F fuck are you even doing? Do you want to die? Is your controller disconnected? Did the pizza you ordered an hour ago just arrive and you forgot to give the dude a tip? Aw, poor you. Tell you what, how about I pause the fucking game for you until you get back, stupid ass. Cavaliere Angelo is a tank. He is a metal lightning death tank with a sword and a vehement motivation to shred Dante into thick-cut demon bacon. This dude is badass, and it is probably the most fun I had fighting a boss in the entire game. You can toss in all the scissor-clicking ghosts and as many 7-armed exploding eyeball amalgamations in your game as you damn well please, but you can't really call yourself DMC without a nice, sexy, good old-fashioned sword off, and that's exactly what this boss is. Almost all of his standard attacks are easily parried by simply swinging your weapon in tandem with his, resulting in a nice, satisfying, sparky light show. Do this a couple times until his batteries run out and he turns into a giant metal piñata for about 6 seconds, at which point he'll zip all the way to one end of the arena, strike a pose like he's flexing for his next Tinder photo, and spark himself back up again. He may have a giant taser sword and a health pool deeper than the fucking Atlantic Ocean, but that's really no reason to be intimidated. Once you memorize his attack patterns, he's pretty easy to counter and take down. But if you feel like wasting time, you can just parry an attack and then go into photo mode and snag yourself a nice cinematic screenshot. Full wordplay intended, this fight is horse shit. Remember 5 bosses ago when I tried to sell you on the fact that V was just this badass that couldn't even somewhat be contended with? Well, in comes a fucking time-traveling Clydesdale to throw a demon-sized wrench in that argument. I'm beginning to recall why the fight with Gurion in DMC3 was such bullshit. It isn't because it wasn't a cool boss, or not even because it was that hard. It was because for at least a few seconds, the game itself just came in and said, alright, time out, now you're frozen in this spot for however long we want because we said so. And that's not me complaining about like the game or whatever. I promise this game is badass and you done goofed if you haven't picked it up. But I don't know, I guess the way DMC handled time manipulation was just never something I agreed with. Why have the horse itself speed up like it's really traveling through time and make the fight only that much cooler when you can instead freeze the player in time and stretch out those next 3 seconds to the length of a fucking Game of Thrones premiere? Fighting Gurion is one of the most convoluted rounds of red light green light I've ever played, only with a bunch of shit flying around trying to kill you. And the fight gets especially irksome when his Quicksilver magic targets not you, but instead one of your pets. So instead of, doing this sensible thing and calling them back to you like a rational-minded person would, you just sit there and spam attacks angrily until the effect wears off and they resume normal time. And speaking of DMC3, you'll probably recognize this guy if your fanhood of the game goes that far back. This battle got me a little emotional because DMC3 Cerberus was one of my first real hurdles as a younger lad just getting his feet wet with third-person hack and slash. And that tantalizing, condescending, easy mode is now selectable bullshit message only made it that much more enjoyable when I expunged that shit from my television screen with a nice stern "it's a no from me" and proceeded to stomp that fucker's teeth out through his ass. And seeing that boss carry over to another DMC game 12 years later, difficulty included, really just made me the happiest little demon hunter in the world. This is a boss that knows exactly what it is. It exists as a proud homage to the game's timeline. Its moveset is made up of really specific boss attacks from previous games, and that, my friend, is when nostalgia really backhands you in the face because much to your expense, those attacks are just as fucking annoying now as they were back then. He's definitely got some OG Cerberus in him for sure, but he's a little Burial here and a bit of Nevin there, maybe even a slight helping of Phantom on the side, and the little bits of other bosses here and there all amalgamate into this giant pile of kill you that is King Cerberus. Incredibly hard once you get into higher difficulties, but this boss is fun as hell. But if we're talking about callbacks, that conversation can't really be ended without mentioning this battle. After the transformation reveal, these pet demons are given the freedom to separate from their original master, and they all explicitly plan to use that freedom to take turns wiping their asses with your face. And wipe away they shall, because holy hot damn, this battle pissed me off. Not only do you start by fighting them one at a time, lowballing you into thinking it'll be one of those cakewalk battles the game just feels obligated to throw at you out of pity, but Dante literally says they don't stand a chance prior to the final fight, even further reinforcing you into that slow-paced, take-it-easy mindset, before throttling the difficulty and throwing you into one of the most hellish displays of butt-fuckery the game has to offer. Just figuring out how the hell this fight even works is a challenge in and of itself. The goal here is to weaken Griffon and Shadow to trigger Nightmare's appearance, and once he becomes the star of the show, you need to be pouring every bit of offense you have right into the back of his demon head. It's pretty easy to figure out when you aren't being mauled by a demonic zoo exhibit, but in order to finish off the first two, you need to force them into their recuperating form and take their actual health down by attacking them once they're stalemated. But wait, there's more! Not only must you do all of that just to trigger Nightmare, but you've also got to stalemate Nightmare himself to take down his actual health and finish him off before he can get back up. And I've never actually let that happen, because the slightest possibility of having to fight all three of them over again absolutely terrifies me. So whenever he's catching his breath, I just DT it up and make damn sure the fight is finished. We are approaching the end of Rusty's list with Mission 19's Vergil fight versus Dante. He's everything you could ask for in a final antagonist, including but not limited to being butt-rupturingly hard to counter and the age-old Vergil patented playstyle of zipping around like a fucking asshole. Don't try and chase this guy around to force a clash. Vergil is able to engage and disengage from a fight extremely quickly, which means he controls the pace of the battle. And if you try and take that from him, he's just gonna show you a bad time. The first phase of this fight is as straightforward as can be. Wait until he approaches you and puts his entire weight into an attack, and then just countercharge with a combo or two of your own. Do this plenty of times and he'll star scream it up and transform into a literal fucking demon jet and try to mow your ass down. And so help you God if you get hit by this attack. If you're on Son of Sparta difficulty, this attack can eat up just about an entire bar of health. And on DMD mode, I'm pretty sure this bullshit just straight up one-shots you. You can time trickster dodges with it, but I just go all out and air hike that bitch just to really make sure I'm out of range. This fight requires all of your attention, and you will be severely punished if your dodges and counters aren't damn near perfect. But the good news is, once you've exchanged blades with him as Dante, the ensuing square off with Nero is about as difficult as falling asleep during a history lecture. And finally, the boss I had by far the most trouble with in just about every difficulty setting in the game thus far. Final form Demon King URIZEN gives you absolutely no sympathy. At this point in the game, Dante has acknowledged URIZEN as his brother Vergil, and the tension brought forth by the sibling rivalry becomes only that much more palpable. URIZEN is no longer interested in waging war from the comfort of his IKEA love seat, and actually shows you he means business by caring to give you a literal standing ovation, right before playing soccer with your body and making your asshole into his own personal penalty box. Demon King URIZEN is the ultimate badass of the game because half the attacks in his final phase can pretty much one-shot you if you're playing anything above Son of Sparta. You've spent the entire game watching him pound you while chilling out in his sofa, so actually seeing him get up and give his all to a fight is shit pants scary. His first phase is challenging enough, but you can maximize maximize your airtime and do a few combos in his face, and most of the time you'll be pretty safe. Honestly, this boss is a rather tame fight up until his final phase, where he just goes full tilt 8-cylinder kick-ass mode. I know this is a game notorious for its dramatic over-the-top action, but good God almighty, he's breaking the sky, he's shooting lasers, teleporting, summoning spikes from the ground, he's pulling out Van Damme kung fu moves and shit. The less amount of time he spends kicking your ass around in this phase, the better for just everyone involved. The only way I would recommend dealing with this final phase is to just rev up the old sin gauge to whip out a final form of your own and pray to God you can do enough damage to finish him off before it ends. And just to keep things as consistent as possible, a short and sweet intro also means an outro just the same, so keep it real. I'm Rusty and I'm off to rot my brain with some more DMC. See ya!